Well, hello everybody. Lost my screen. Starting again. Hello everyone and welcome to the end of July Damstra Insights webinar. My name is Ruth and I'm a trainer at Ideagen Damstra Technology. And today we also have the Head of Innovation, Paul Hempsel, joining us. And he'll keep an eye on any questions you have and responding within the chat. Or he'll jump in and ask me to show you a how-to. During this webinar, I'll be showing you dashboards that you may not have looked at before and how to create visuals from tables or registers. And then we're going to have a look at creating pivot tables from registers. So I'll hand over to Paul to introduce himself and we'll get started with those dashboards. So over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Ruth. Good morning, everyone. For those who haven't met me, I'm Paul Hempsel, the product owner for Damstra Insights, and welcome to the Damstra Insights for Safety webinar. So this is just a reminder, this is part 3 in the series. The other 2 parts in the series have been uploaded to YouTube already, to the Ideagen Damstra YouTube channel, along with several other Insights training videos that we've already got available. And we'll be uploading part 3 after the session. So for those customers that are just getting familiar with Damstra Insights, I would really like to encourage you to explore the library of about 60 standard dashboards that we have. The events register is one of the key dashboards that we have, but you may not know that we've actually split this out into additional complementary dashboards that are related to events. So things with a specific focus. So events with corrective actions, MVA events, environmental events, event costs, and I think Ruth's going to explore some of those in this session. 2 of my favorite dashboard would relate to Vault Check. So we've got the Vault Check register and a Vault Check inspection responses dashboard. I like them because they're really action oriented. So the first allows you to quickly identify the status of inspections, the ones that aren't started, the ones that are in progress and due, and also have a look at the resource allocation of your inspections. And the later also lets you dive into the inspection responses, and you can then do a really deep analysis of those inspections and check for non-compliances. Our standard dashboards and sources are continuously being improved, so based on customer suggestions. So for example, just in the last 2 weeks, we've made some amendments to the corrective actions register. They now have new fields that are being calculated in them. So things like days currently open, days to complete, when the corrective action is due in the number of days, and how many overdue days the corrective action is. The events register has seen some changes as well. So we now are exposing injury types fields, so lost time, first aid, medical, no treatment, etc. We also showcase whether or not the formal investigation has been required. And we're now also showing the type of person for the event reporter. The plant and equipment and assets register has been improved as well. So we're now containing the name of the driver and vehicle purchase dates. And they're just some of the many improvements that we're making on a week-to-week basis. So we really would love to hear your suggestions for future insights, source changes, and even dashboards themselves. In addition, in terms of feedback, we also want to be able to make sure that you're getting the most out of Damstra Insights, and we'd love to hear your suggestions for future Insights webinar content. Is there a feature that you're struggling with or need help to understand? If so, we'll develop some video training that will help you get the most out of Insights. So I'm going to hang around and help answer some questions throughout the session. So over to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Paul. So team, here we are in Insights. And along with the most familiar dashboard, as Paul said, is the Safety Events Register. It will open up in its visuals at the top. But at the end of most dashboards, of these standard dashboards, down the bottom, we have an overview table or the events register. And that table is filled with columns that are pulled straight out of safety. So this events register, if I was to go over to the settings, the information says it's a table, the data source is from the events register, and the visual name is the events register details. If I was to scroll along the bottom, you'll see these columns have things like subject name, category name, the event status, location, the injury type, and a whole heap of more columns that you can make other visuals from. Going back to those 3 dots for that visual, to the settings, and down to what I call the graphic equalizer button from the 80s, the settings, these are the columns that are included in that table. If I was to click on that little pencil, I can see that there are other tables that haven't been included in that standard table, but we could click on case number, the department name, add that, the full description, click continue and apply, and our table is reading with those new columns, with our full description and our department name. Most of us are familiar with the Safety Events Register, but heading back to the library, you can find further information about events in different registers, such as if I was to go to the Injuries Register, Safety Injuries Register, with our filters at the top, our existing standard visuals, down at the bottom, in our table with our event details, we have our initial treatment, because it's an injuries register, our injury description, and if I was to scroll along here, this is where we'd find our injury body area and our injuries body location, our side, and our injury name. So where does all of that information come from? If I was to quickly just shoot back to safety, to the web form portal, and if your workers were to report an injury, scrolling down to that short form, we have our injury details here, which would be our body location, our body area, and the injury, such as head and neck, back of head, and a cut. You might find it quite weird that in our injury details back of head, we also have a head cold. But if I was to cancel that and report illness in our web form portal, and our illness would be head and neck, back of head, and we could add our head cold to our injury list or our illness list. Same with respiratory, hay fever, breathless. If you are finding your body areas and your injury lists or your injury or illness lists a bit weird, back in safety, if I was to go up to settings, down to events, and injury management. This is where you can edit those body locations, body areas, and the types. Our body location being our head, back of head, just like that body, and our injury type being cut and head cold. And over here on the right-hand side, we could add more injury types or illness types, or delete that. This is where you can edit those details, which populates the injury body location, body area, injury name, and the body side. This injury register, this table, I can make a visual out of this table, such as I go up to the settings. You can see it's a table, but what I want to do is I'm going to change that to, using the visual style, a bar graph. And it looks a bit boring just as a bar graph, but I'll use my graphic equalizer button and I can start doing some things to this bar graph. First thing, I'll change that to horizontal and enable this subgroup. So over here, I've got a group called type of event. I'm going to enable that subgroup. And that subgroup gives me a new subgroup here as well. I can make that a stacked bar chart. And here's my label, but I'm going to add the value to that as well. Because this is demo data, I'm just going to change that preset to my previous year. So that was done that calendar, preset previous year, and apply. My group labels position is this bit here. So I'm going to change that to outside diagonal and close those settings. And this is where I can do some more things with this visual, this bar chart. First thing I'm going to do is over here in the group, I want to group that by body location. Remember that body location was up here, my body location. And then back into my subgroup, I'm going to group by that body area. As I've left the labels on all of these, I can take off the legend. Go to my settings, to my color palette, and take off that legend. So in our safety injuries register, because I'm talking about injury body location and body area, I'm already in the injuries register. I don't have to add a filter that the type of event is injury. So now that I've made this bar chart from my injuries register or my table, I'm going to go back to those three dots and I'm going to save that to my visual gallery. And my visual name is going to be injury by body location. And I've saved that injury by body location to my visual gallery. I'll shoot back to that library. That was my events register and my injuries register. Another really good event dashboard is called Event Investigation Time to Completion. What I like about this register is that it's got number of events sorted by site. That is an existing visual in the visual gallery. It's a heat map from the investigations register, number of events sort by site. In fact, in the library, if I was just to search by event, we've got an events action register, causal analysis dashboard, as Paul mentioned, the environmental events, and our event register, cost register, and our event register with corrective actions. Another register or another dashboard you may not have explored is what's called the KPI summary dashboard. You'll see this quite a new register if you haven't had a look at it, KPI summary dashboard. At the bottom, there's a pivot table, and the pivot table has been sorted with financial year to date, month to date, previous year, previous month, and that's why this dashboard doesn't have a time bar. This pivot table, I could add a filter that I just wanted the indicators so my indicator to be my lead indicators and apply those. And now we've got our lead indicators, which module, and what we did with that. I'm going to change this visual to a heat map. And now with our heat map, our rows are our lead indicator and our columns are our modules. I want my rows to be that KPI or key performance indicator. So just down here with my rows, I'm going to change that to the actual KPI. And up the top with my subject, I'm going to change those columns to the time. And the time is going to populate as per the original KPI summary dashboard. So my columns are going to be that time period. With our current financial year, our lead indicators. And now I'm going to save that heat map and I'm going to call it
Ruth, before you jump off from there, I just wanted to mention that you can also use the range filter up the top of that visualization. So if you're wanting to just remove some of the noise, you could reduce the data that appears in that to just say items that have a count of maybe higher than 10. So if you just drag that range filter from the left over to the right a little bit, we can adjust that, and that will help us identify the data that really needs our attention.
What's that called again, Paul? That it's a
Range filter. Yeah.
Dynamic range filter.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. So I have saved that. I'm sure I saved that as lead indicators. I head back to the library again. Go to my visual gallery. And there are the two visuals that I just created, my heat map and my bar graph. One of the first dashboards that Paul and his team built was called Reported Items. I love this dashboard. Okay, safety reported items. It's going to give us all the reported items across all of safety, anything that was reported. An example of that, all events, observations, feedback, and risk details. Here's my type, my status, my category, subject, description, and severity. Go into my three dots here to my settings. It's a table from the reported items, and that's the visual name, reported items, all details. So that visual is in a standard dashboard. Using this data source, this visual name or the data source, I can go straight to my visual gallery and start creating my own visuals using that table or that data source. So in my visual gallery, I'm going to add a visual from that data source. Reported items. And this is where I could create my different visual types. So again, I can create a heat map, a bar graph, or a donut or a pie. I'll create a pie. And then I could group that by anything out of those columns. So I could call that I want actually the severity. And I'm just going to change that calendar to previous year. And I could edit those items. I don't want those relative values or the percentage. And take off my legend. And there's my severity of my items. I could add a filter that my event type was just my injuries or injuries and incidents. Continue and apply. Once again, my safety reported items with my visual, I'm going to save that visual as injury, illness, severity. So that's been successfully saved. Well, that was a little bit about the dashboards that we haven't been familiar with or what we're not using and how we can create visuals from those other tables. Is there any questions before we move on to pivot tables?
No questions in the chat at the moment.
Thanks, Paul. So we're going to have a look at pivot tables. And there are a number of ways you can create this visual, as I explained. We can create the visual in a new dashboard from the source, add it directly from the visual gallery, or look at a pivot table on a standard dashboard, change it, and save it. So if I was to go to events register with corrective actions, in this overview table, if I was to scroll along the bottom, we can find here treatment required. Now, the treatment required field is pulled into a number of different event registers and visuals, and there will be already standard visuals made with the treatment required. But using this overview, we can make ourselves a pivot table with treatment required. So let's make a visual from this. Again, as it's demo data, I'm just going to change that to previous year. But you can preset it to anything you want, previous month, year to date, current month, last month. And then with this overview table, I'm going to go to my settings and change that visual to a pivot table. Well, it already is a pivot table. Go to my settings, and this is where I could edit my row groups. Firstly, with my rows, I'm going to change that to my quarter and apply that. I'm going to take out my stage, my severity. I just want my event date. So now there are my rows. And with my columns, my column groups, probably just want the treatment required. I'm going to add, and my metrics are going to be the count of treatment required. So there's my treatment required and my count of event ID. Call that event ID. That's better. Well, that's one way to make a pivot table. Or can we do that again, making the visual from the start? I'm going to add a visual. From that event register corrective actions. Make that a pivot table. Go to my settings, and my rows, I want that to be the site name and my columns, action status. So overdue and completed. From here, I could save that visual as so I created that visual. When we looked at that table in the first place, and change that back to a table. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create that visual. In my visual gallery, I'm going to add a visual. From my event register with corrective actions, make that a pivot table. Go to my settings, and my rows, instead of them being the site level 1 name, I'm going to change my rows to the event date, continue, by the quarter, and I'm going to apply that, see what that looks like. There's my event date by the quarter. Again, I'm just going to change that to previous year. And my columns, I want to be the treatment required. Continue and apply. And it says the treatment, medical treatment, auto size those columns. So for last year, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, these were the treatment required. Because this is an event register with corrective actions, I'd probably have to add a filter that the event type was injury. So there's my visual, and I'm going to save that as now that I've made my pivot table for these columns, I'll go back to my visual menu, can change that to a heat map. Take off my legend, and I've got my event register with corrective actions here. So now I'm going to save that as well. So today we've added these visuals with our pivot tables, our heat maps, and our pie chart. So if I was to shoot back to the library, I'm going to add a dashboard, add an existing visual, my heat map, add an existing visual, my pivot table, and you'll see now that I've added them, I can't re-add them. You can't double up on your visuals. Corrective action by site. My little severity pie chart. My lead indicators, that's a bit noisy, isn't it, Paul? And the last one we did was injuries by body location. So now with my dashboard, I'm going to save my dashboard as and save that dashboard. With these, we can move them around, swap them around as well. I could grab that one, put it at the bottom here. And with my timeline for all of these, it says January the 1st. I've changed them all to year to date or last year. But if I was to have a look at that event date, it applies to all of those items.
Ruth, I was wondering if it might be a good idea just to do a very simple example. When you're in a dashboard, just create a basic table for, could be for compliance register or something like that. But I wanted to highlight that we see a lot of customers that will generate a brand new dashboard for every month of the year. So they'll do one for June, July, August, for each month, and that could just be to be able to capture that current month's events and then produce that for a report. What I wanted to suggest is that and highlight is that people can use the dynamic options in the time bar. So that can essentially save you a lot of effort if you are wanting to create a register that's just looking at the previous month's actions or the previous week's actions. Then you can look at that as well.
Thanks, Paul. That events action register.
Yeah.
So what Paul was saying, down here at the bottom with this dynamic date or this dynamic timeline, if I was to click on that calendar and use these presets, and the preset might be, we'll do current year. Actually, Paul, what we should do is that preset would be current month.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I might not have anything here. No. Imagine if it was current month. So here's our current quarter, July the 1st through to September the 30th. And if I saved that as Events Action Register current quarter, what that means is in the next quarter, or as we move past September the 30th, if it was current week or current month, when we open this up, it would always default to the current month. It's a dynamic date. So where it says Event Action Register, say it was current month, I don't have to save it as Event Action Register current month, July. I could just save it as current month, and my preset would always be a dynamic date current month. Is that what you meant, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the same thing works for say a rolling 60 days. If you want to do a rolling 60 or rolling 90, yeah, it'd be good to sort of show that as well.
There probably won't be anything in it. So this presets goes from the maximum available range or the biggest number. I wouldn't recommend a rolling minute, not much would change there. But as Paul said, a rolling 30 days, rolling 7 days, or rolling 90 days. Or your rolling 365 days. Tomorrow, that would be July the 25th, 2023, through to July the 24th.
And you can configure that if you need something that's in between those presets, you can configure that as well so that you can do an offset based on today's date. So, you could have, now minus, 40 days or anything like that you can do.
Now minus 6 months to now.
Yeah.
Or for things like training, for training statuses or training expiry, you can even change that to now, apply, to now, enable that offset, plus 3 months.
Yeah, put the plus, press plus though. I think it's still looking in history.
Oh, we'll go to that training expiry. Upcoming training expiry. This one here. Training expiry date between now to now plus 12 months. So we can look at that 3 months ahead. There's our training expiry date there. This one's also really good as a heat map as well. When our rows would be the full name, and our columns training expiry date, by the month. So in August, we've got these, and if I left click, I can look at the details of that training is going to expire. 12th of August, 2024. So team, thank you so much for your time today. That was just a quick looking, just reminding you to have a look at all those other dashboards in there. They're continuously been enhanced and added to. And if you've got any other columns that you'd like to see in registers or dashboards, we'll either find them or Paul and his team will put them in there as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if there's any other questions, please let me know. Put them in the chat. We'll have a look at that as well in this chat, the Q&A and the questions. But otherwise, that was looking at other dashboards and making pivot tables. So hopefully we'll all get better at making pivot tables. We might have to revisit this again. Some of them are not easy. It's just a case of playing around with them and making those different visuals. Paul, have you got anything else to add there?
Really just wanted to remind everyone, let us know if you've got anything that you're struggling with inside the Damstra feature sets, anything that you think you'd need some help with training, and Ruth and I can work together to get some more video content out for you.
Otherwise, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and we will see you again soon in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.